Hello. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
I
sir.
have asked that all of you to mute yourself. Nobody should unmute. All of you to mute. Caleb, you have to use earpiece in order to. Not having a radio or TV at the background to make so much noise. Yeah, I think I can mute here. That is me myself. Okay. Can you all hear me now? We are getting ready to start the class. Monica, you are not connected.
Yes, sir.
I cannot see you. Okay. Caleb, Amanyo, I cannot see you. Nobody should unmute him or herself. I have mute all of you up. Amanyo, Jessica. Jessica.
Sir.
Please click on your video in order to see me so that I can also see you. Press that down your screen at the bottom left corner. You see the video. You see start video there and click on it in order to connect. Okay. I have mute all of you and you are muting yourself. Nobody should unmute him or herself. Otherwise, whatever you are doing, they will be giving a feedback. Are you okay?
Okay, sir.
So I have to mute all of you before you'll be able to get enough information that I'll have to give you. So nobody should unmute him or herself. Can you all hear me? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Oh, so but they can hear. All right. Okay, good afternoon, all of you. You are welcome to this special class. It's a way to get in contact with you so that we can at least get ourselves updated, not to be lacking behind. We'll be discussing this topic. I have already treated it with you. It was the last topic that we have looked at, but I see that's important that we'll look at it again, which is public sector accounting. I want to believe that even though we have treated it, some of you were not very, very clear with it. And so it will be very much important I go over it again step by step so that any question that you have at this time, you can ask and have our problems addressed. So public sector accounting, at the end of the discussion, you should be able to be aware of the sources and the application of the government local revenue and the sources for government and local authorities. You should be able to acquire skills to follow and practice simple government accounting procedures. You should also be able to develop skills in preparing accounts for government and its agencies. And this level, it is just an introduction to the topic. When you move to tertiary, you will go deeper into this. So our duty now is to look at the fair view on how government accounting is prepared. So let's basically look at the overview of public sector organizations. Public sector organizations, as we know, is mainly described as all organizations which are not privately owned. An organization that is not privately owned and is operated but established by and run, controlled, and financed by the government or the state. Those organizations are what we are referring to as the public sector. Once again, when we are talking about public sector organizations, we are basically saying that organizations that are not owned by individuals, but are owned by the state. It is established by the state. It is run by the state. It is the state that controls the organization 100%, or some percentage, but have the greater say in how the organization runs. It is financed by the government and or the state. That is basically what public sector organizations is about. The public sector organizations and then institutions and then organizations which are established by an act of parliament. If an act of parliament does not establish an organization, then we cannot say that it is government owned. So government of any country cannot uh, establish an organization without approval through the parliament of that country. So in Ghana, all the organizations that are owned by the state, by the government, which are controlled by the government, which are financed by the government, which are established by the government, they actually were established by an act of parliament for the purpose of providing services to the general public, but not for profit motive, but to render welfare services to the individuals of the country. It is made up of the national or central government, the local government, government companies, government boards, authorities, and all departments, agencies, commissions, ministries that seek to promote interests and well-being of the general public. We will take our time to look at some departments and ministries that are established by government. However, if any of you have any question as we are discussing along the way, you just go and show by hand and I'll allow for the question. Is that okay? So we'll look at some government departments and ministries. There are a whole lot of them, but we'll just take our time and look at just a few of them. We'll look at ministries. Ministries that are owned, that are established, that are financed, that are controlled by government. Some of them include the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Local Government, Ministry of Sports, Ministry of Education, and so on and so forth. We also have commissions, and the commissions include Electoral Commission, Mineral Commission. We also have Insurance Commission, Commission on Human Rights, and Administrative Justice, Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, National Commission for Civic Education, and so on and so forth. We have services. The services department of Ghana include Ghana Education Service, the VAT Service, the Internal Revenue Service, Judicial Service, Health Service, Immigration Service, Police Service, Audit Service, Parliamentary Service, Prison Service, and so on and so forth. We have the Public Department, and this Public Department include Public Works Department, Department of Games and Wildlife, Department of Feeder Roads, Department of National Lotteries and Information Service Department. There are more, a whole lot of them, but these are just few. To continue, we have councils. These councils include Export Promotion Council, Council for Scientific Research into Plant Medicine, National Council on Women and Development, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Then we'll move on to state-owned enterprises. They include Electricity Company of Ghana, Ghana Water Company Limited, Ghana National Petroleum Company, State Insurance Company, and so on and so forth. Then we have agencies of government, which include Ghana National Procurement Agency, Ghana News Agency, Environmental Protection Agency, and so on and so forth. All these ministries, councils, commissions, departments that we have looked at, they all fall under the public sector organizations. So these are not all, but we are just saying that we are looking at some. Are we all right? We are just looking at some of them, which are the most important ones. These are just some. All these are organizations, agencies, and services and ministries that are owned by government. They are established by government. Government controls them, and government finances them. And they are established primarily not for the purpose of making profit, even though government have some organizations that run for profit, but the primary objective of government is not for profit motive. We move on to look at public sector accounting, what we are actually here for. So as an accountant in the making, you are working under the government. You have to account all these ministries, the commissions, the agencies, departments, and others that we have looked at. They have responsibility to account for every single transactions that they undertake in this department to the government. So we are coming to look at what the public sector accounting really entails and what it is about. When we say public sector accounting, it is basically the process of accounting for the financial activities of the state or the public sector within the year. I will take it again. We are saying that public sector accounting is the process of accounting for the financial activities of the state or the public sector within the year. It is an accounting system used by the government, which is based on cash payments and receipts. What it means is that government accounting does not take into consideration credit transactions. They take into consideration expenditure that are incurred. When money come, they spend it, and money come, they receive it. So they are into cash and carry system. So government accounts are prepared on what we call based on cash payment and then cash receipts. Its main financial statement are the revenue and expenditure account and the balance sheet, which show the receipts and disbursement of public funds in all levels of government. You can see that um, government organizations' primary objective is not to trade, it's not to buy goods for it to trade, it's not to make profit. For that reason, they are not into preparing accounts that are trading nature to determine profit or losses. Whatever they receive, they spend, and it is a non-profit-making organization. For that matter, the account that they prepare is revenue, receipt, and payment account, which is similar to cash book. Whatever they receive in a form of cash, they will debit it to the receipt and payment account, and whatever they have spent are credited and are paid for are credited to the receipts and payment account. Then they also prepare the income and expenditure account and then balance sheet. To move on, the explanation, the objective of the public sector accounting is to provide information to Parliament to deliberate on the financial and development process of the economy by the government, and to monitor the implementation of annual government budgets which is presented to them. So every agency, every department, every ministry is expected that at the end of the financial year, if it is police service, if it is agriculture department, if it is commission for civic education, if it is education service, money which are disbursed to them to use for their individual project, they are expected to account for how they receive the money and how they spend the money. And government then, these informations are presented by one person, which is the Minister of Finance, to the Parliament, and Parliament will have to debate on it, to agree and disagree, and be sure that all expenditure that are incurred, all money received, everything presented are in place. The public sector accounting also help Parliament and the general public to make informed judgment on the management of the consolidated fund. So you and I, who are the general public, when accounts are presented, we will question the presentation of this account to see if government actually has spent the resources that have been accumulated by them well, invested it well to the right places or not, or they have pushed into their individual pockets. If you look at the term that I have highlighted, I said that it also helps Parliament and general public to make informed judgment on the management of the consolidated fund. I will later explain what consolidated fund is about. Consolidated fund, so note that I believe you all have your pen and jotters with you, and you are writing something down that you can ask me a question later on. Consolidated fund, I will be looking at it later for you to have an understanding. Now let's look at the purpose of the public sector accounting. Why do the government need to account on its doing? Why should all the services, all the department, why should they prepare account? So the purpose for which the public sector accounts are prepared are: one, it is to ascertain major difficulties and problems being encountered by the operatives. When we say operatives, I'm talking about the agencies, the department, and all the organizations. Number two, it is to determine cost effectiveness with which plan objectives are achieved. If government have put in place a project to construct roads, to construct hospitals, to construct schools, to construct airports, to do any other project, the accounting for this project which have been undertaken helps to be able to understand what actually happened and to know the set objectives are actually achieved. 3, the public sector accounting is to serve as a basis for planning. It serves as a basis for appraisal of performance of officials. So when we say appraisal comes in many forms. Appraisal could come down, for instance, if I am your employer and you are my employees and you are working in my organizations, one of the ways I could appraise you is to congratulate you, not necessarily giving you anything, but the words of encouragement I give you also motivate you for you to know that, yes, I am watching and I know what you are doing. The appraisal could also serve as a means of promotion. It could also serve as a means of allowances to officials who are working under the government and under various departments. It is to serve as basis for control. It is also to serve as a basis for decision making by government. Who has unmuted herself? There is a whole lot of noise at the background that is disturbing a lot. You are with me? All right. The next is that it shows how revenue or government expenditures are financed. It also ascertains genuineness of transaction. The account is also to provide general statistical information. It is to satisfy constitutional requirement of the nation. What it means is that no individual department organizations under the control of the government can stand up on their own and use government funds for whatever they please. No, if the constitution does not allow for and they have gone ahead to undertake any project using government funds, then what happens is that they will be liable for any consequences that may arise. It gives evidence of financial responsibility to ascertain how capital expenditure will be financed, and so on and so forth. We go ahead to look at all these accounts that are prepared and presented. Who are the stakeholders? Who need them? So looking at users of public sector accounting, one of the users is the taxpayer, just like you and I. The taxpayer. The next is the members of parliament. We have donors. The donors will be internal or external organizations that may donate to support the government, either within the country or from outside the country. We have trade unions. We have employees who are working under the government. They could also be called civil servants or public servants. We have regulators. We have the bankers and lenders to government. So banks lend to government. We have other institutions that lend to government. They want to know if government is using the fund appropriately and will be able to pay the money they loan onto the government or not. Pressure groups, society, civil society or non-governmental organizations. We are researchers. We are students like you and myself. We are ministers of state. We are local assemblies, that we have the district assemblies, which are in some cases municipal assemblies or metropolitan assemblies. We are foreign investors. We have financial analysts. We have the media. We go ahead. We have the controller and accountant general. We have the auditor general. We have the private sector business. We have the government economic monitoring authorities. We have the economic planners. we have the stock brokers, we have financial institutions, either local or international. We have the parliament, the legislature, or the national assemblies. We have government agencies, and so forth and so on. So these are examples of people who are interested in government public accounts. Government public account. So I have given you more than enough that in an examination, you should be able to write as many as you can. Now we want to look at what makes a public sector different from private sector. The difference between the public sector and the private sector. The private sector sometimes is also called commercial accounting. Commercial accounting. The private sector accounting, we also sometimes call it commercial accounting. So we are looking at the difference between the public sector accounting and then the private sector or commercial accounting. One, in private sector, the central aim is usually to earn profit. No individual like you and me will establish business with our own resources or gone somewhere to get some funds from somewhere, either as a means of loan or as a gift or donation or inheritance from someone to invest in business, and will do that just free of charge to become Father Christmas. No, you want to turn on that money to survive into the future. So private organizations are established purposely for profit motives for the enterprise to improve the return on capital employed, whereas the main function of government is to administer the country and to render various services onto the country. So that is why government building school will not come and say pay for the structure that they are putting up. Government have the responsibility for constructing the roads. Government have the responsibility for building hospitals for us to receive our services there whenever we fall ill, just to render service to us and many more. Another difference is that public sector bodies continue to exist due to political will, whereas private sector bodies survive due to public sector. We are talking about public sector bodies continue to exist due to political will, whereas private sector bodies survive due to financial success. We can cite an example of what had happened few years down the line, and even in the situation that we are in now, that government will have to take drastic decisions, close down some banks, and you could see that all the banks, all the insurance companies, all the service and loan companies, all the financial institutions that exist now, majority of them are owned by government. But all the others that have gone down were owned by private individuals. So government will allows public organizations to exist, but where the private individual does not have the fund to continue or to expand or to provide the necessary resources to continue a business, it is likely private business will go down. So that is another difference. In the public sector accounting, it is broadly grouped into two. The public sector accounting is broadly grouped into two. One is public sector accounts and departmental accounts. Whereas in the private sector, all transactions are classified broadly into three categories of account. We have the real account, we have the nominal account, and we have the personal account. We have learned all this, that the real account, they are those accounts that we use to record tangible items, that is assets. But the nominal account records income and expenditure related items, and then the personal account record transactions that are relating to what? The private owner. To continue, we also have the final account of the private sector, our profit and loss account, and the balance sheet. But that of the public sector accounting, the final account, that the receipts and payment, statement of assets and liabilities, which is called the balance sheet, the statement of revenue and expenditure transactions. To continue, another difference is that the public sector bodies obtain finance predominantly from tax revenue. Government generate funds largely from taxes that are levied on various activities, and then non-tax revenue. We have grants, we have loans, and we have other funds. Whereas in the private sector or the commercial sector, they obtain their funds through sales of goods and services, through equity, and through loans. We also have debtors and creditors are not recognized in public sector accounting. What it means is that the public sector does not engage in selling on credit or does not engage in credit transaction. Public sector does not do that. Public sector accounting is based mainly on cash transactions, cash release, cash pay. They don't go into I will do this transaction and payment to be done later. No. When government releases fund to any department, the department will recognize that fund as, for instance, if the national government or the central government releases fund to the local assembly, immediately the fund have been released, the national or the central government will recognize that money, whether the local government spent the money or not, it will recognize it as money paid. So when the central government is preparing receipts and payment account, you realize that receipts and payment account is equivalent to cash book. So for cash book, when cash comes in, it is debited, and when cash goes out, it is credited. So when central government releases funds to the local assemblies, what happens is that the central government will recognize that money as money paid. So the receipt and payment account will be credited. While the local government, for instance, the district assembly or the municipal assembly to which the fund will be released to, they will recognize that money as received. They will also open their receipt and payment account and debit into their account. So debtors and creditors are not recognized in public sector accounting, and therefore are not shown even in the balance sheet. Whereas in a commercial accounting, that is the private sector, debtors and creditors must be shown in the balance sheet with analysis of debtors and creditors. Because for them, as you and I who may own businesses, we sell on credit. We cannot survive to say that, hey, where somebody will, local people will write on their kiosk, no credit. Bigger businesses may not survive in that regard. They will have to sell to people, trusted customers on credit, for which they expect payment to be made later. So private sector account or commercial accounting, they recognize debtors and creditors. For that matter, they, when preparing the balance sheet, they record them as such, and many more. We have a lot of them that I am just uploading. We go ahead and then look at where government generates its revenue from, the sources from which government generates its revenue from. I may pause. If any of you have questions and you want to answer, I will pause here so that you ask the question. But if you don't have question, then I will go ahead and make the presentation. So if you have any question at this time of the presentation, just raise your hand. I will see you here and I will allow you to ask your question. Okay. If nobody have question, then I will go ahead with the presentation. Sources of government or public sector revenue. Sources of government or public sector revenue. Government generates its fund its revenue from a whole lot of sources. And these sources are grouped into two. We have the external source, and then we have the internal source. So you have the internal source, or which is also called the local source of government revenue, and then we also have the external source. We'll take them one by one. So if you look at the internal source of government revenue, we have taxation. The tax, a tax is, we know is an amount that is levied on the income of individuals and companies, which we call direct taxes, or on goods and services, which are called indirect taxes. Government also generates its fund through excise duties. These are the taxes that are levied on goods and services produced within the country. Goods and services that are produced within the country. When government place levy on them, these levies are called excise duties. Fines. Government also generates fund or revenue through fines which are levied by the court. When any of you, God forbid, misbehave and you are taken to court, the police come and arrest you and take you to court, and then your parents come pleading. They will not just release you like that. They will have to bail you, and you have to pay for. And this fine which you pay, it is not for the judge, it is not for the police who have come to arrest you, but it goes into the government coffers. We also have relevant government agencies for various offenses that they commit. Currently, government is trying a lot of people that they have defrauded the country and added that they have to refund those monies. You have heard of Woyome to refund a lot of money. All the prisoners who are in prison now, they have misbehaved. They fine them because some could not pay the fine. They have to be in prison. So fines are also sources from which government generate its revenue from. We have royalties. Royalties, they are the amount that are paid by the organization that exploit natural resources of the state. For instance, if in whole here, we should have, let's say, gold, and an organization will want to come and mine this gold, this organization will have to be paying royalties to the local assembly. And so the local assembly hands to the central government. In many parts of the countries where factories are established, they annually pay royalties to the government. It's also served as a source of income. We have fees. These fees, they are amounts that are charged on registration of vehicle, business, land. For instance, when Sonrise Christian High School is established, the school, the proprietor, the administrator will have to get a business certificate. He has to register the business. By registering and obtaining certificate to run the school, they pay a fee. This fee goes to the government. Are we all right? Mobile money vendors, all of them, before they operate, they have to obtain business certificate. This certificate is not free of charge. If you buy vehicle, like Caleb, the vehicle that your father has, he has to go, he cannot buy the vehicle and start riding it without authorization. He has to go to the driver license authority and then register the vehicle and pay fees. These fees are for government. So you can see that the numerous vehicles that people own in this country, all the fee they pay, they go to the government. If you own land, you buy a land, you will have to register the land in your name. And when you go, this fee that you pay is a revenue to the government. We also have levies. They are taxes that are charged by local government or municipal assemblies or metropolitan assemblies and collected from residents who are engaged in relevant business activities. So in a local environment, for instance, wherever you are, for instance, in Ho here, there is no local business that is being run that is not paying tax. For instance, hairdressers, before you operate as a hairdresser in any locality, you have to obtain permission by getting registered through the district assemblies. And all these serve as source of revenue to the government. Government also generates funds through borrowings. Government may borrow money from domestic source such as the bank, the general public, especially through government treasury bills. It also serves as a source of revenue which they use to undertake many projects as they want. Government may also proceed to sell old properties that they think they no longer need them. They have some vehicle that they have used for some years, and because it's giving them problem, they want to dispose it off. The revenue, the money that is ascertained from the sale of this vehicle are you serve as a source of revenue to the government and other properties that is deemed fit. We have earning from government investment. Government also invests in agriculture like cocoa, timber, cotton, coffee, shea, butter, and others. All these monies that are earned serve as a source of revenue to the government. Don't forget, we are looking at internal source. We said that government have sources of which they generate revenue from, and these sources are grouped into two. We have internal source and we have external source. So you will have to pay attention to this, because in examination, when a question is asked, you should state maybe 5 sources from which government generates revenue from. That they didn't limit you. They say 5 sources. So you can state all the sources mixed up, both internal source and then external source, all mixed up together. But if you are asked to state internal sources or the local sources from which government generates revenue from, you have to know. If you state a source which is external, your answer will definitely be wrong. So pay attention to the internal sources or the local sources from which government may generate revenue from. Then we have rent from government properties. Government gets some properties that they rent out to the general public to render services unto them. Money generated from renting out these also serve as a source of revenue to the government. For instance, government build markets, and all the rooms that are at the marketplaces, market women and men opt for them. They don't go and take them free of charge. They take and pay. These monies that are paid from this rent serve as a source of revenue to the government. Government sometimes also buy heavy equipment like bulldozers that are there, that individuals, private organizations who need it can go and rent it to use and then return it. Monies that are generated from renting out these serve as a source of revenue to the government. Then we also have profits and dividends from government-owned enterprises. As I said, even though government is established for welfare purposes, they have other organizations that are profit motives. For instance, the Electricity Company of Ghana is a revenue generating organization. So profit that they earn and then any investment that they make, the revenue, the dividend that they earn from that also serve as source of revenue. If you continue, we also look at external sources, meaning sources of revenue that does not come from within the country, but from outside. We have loan from external sources. This could be from the World Bank. It could be from the International Monetary Fund. It could be from any developed country or any established organization outside that will want to finance resources in the country that government will loan from. We also have grants. Developed countries, IMF and others also allow some grant to government, which also serve as a source of revenue to the government. We have donations. Donation could come from outside to help alleviate situations in a country. We also have import and export duties. So they are the taxes that are levied on goods that are exported outside the country and then imported into the countries. The revenue generated from this is an external source of revenue to government. To continue, so these are basically the two main sources of revenue to the government. So we say we have internal source and then we also have external source. We have looked at them extensively and I believe you are okay with them. Once more, if you have any question to ask, I can pause here, you raise your hand, I will see you and you ask your question, then we can move on. All right. If no question, then I'm allowed to move on in the presentation. The next thing we want to look at is sources of revenue for local authorities. Mind you, the first one we looked at was for the central government. So government of Ghana. Where does it generate its revenue from? We say internal and then external. We have looked at them closely. Now, some of the departments under government are the local authorities. That is the district assemblies, which can also be called the metropolitan assembly or the municipal assemblies. They also impose some levies that also, they also find means through which they also generate revenue from to use to run the municipalities, the local environment. And this is what we are going to look at. So we are looking at sources from which local authorities or local districts, that is the municipal assemblies, that is the metropolitan assemblies, also generate their revenue from. One is entertainment. Those of you who live in the cities especially, they enjoy this the most. We have concerts that are organized that people will have to attend. And these concerts that are organized, some are organized by the municipality, which people who attend pay some levies in order to attend them. It serves as a revenue which through the means of entertainment. They may also organize sporting activities that in order for people to watch, they pay some levies to go into the stadiums to go and pay. There are cinemas in the cities like Accra. They have cinema that people go there and watch movie all night long. And before you watch, you have to pay something. And this entertainment, if it is organized by the municipal assembly, by the local assembly, the local authority, money generated from there serves as a source of revenue for the district assembly. Next is gambling and betting taxes. Individuals who are into lottery, they go, so in Accra, for instance, we have casinos, you go, we have sport bet and others. All these organizations, they pay tax to do all this. Taxes that are paid on them. If we go to developed countries, they have horse races. So people who want to entertain themselves, they go into horse racing and bicycle racing and other which are organized. People will have to pay for in order to engage in this. It serves as a revenue, source of revenue to the local assembly. We have rates. If you own a property, for instance, if you own a house, so those of you whose parents own houses, which you even rent out, that you have tenants in your houses, you don't, your father or your mother or your uncle who you live with, do not only receive the rent and enjoy it alone. They pay rates to the local assembly every year. For instance, Sonrise Christian High School, every year we pay rates to the municipal assembly. It serves as a source of revenue to the assembly. We are market toast. All the market women that sells in the market and men, they don't use the market free of charge. You realize that sometimes when you are going to market with your mother, there will be people, GPRT people at the gate that will have to tear some receipt for you to pay something to enable you sell in the market. Revenue generated from those sources serve as revenue for the local authority. They are rent from local government properties. Government also put out some properties that they rent out. It could be a building, it could be football field, it could be any other property. We have fees from business operating permits. For you to run a business, you have to go and obtain permits before you can be able to do that. We have income from use of cemetery. If the municipal assembly, if it is not your family that have their family cemetery, but the municipal assembly have a designated place where everybody who want to bury their dead bodies go to bury, they don't do that free of charge. For instance, in whole year, we have the whole public cemetery. Anybody who lost their relative and who want to go and use that place to bury their relative, pay. The money that is paid for the dead body to be buried serve as income to the local assembly. We have royalties. I've explained that earlier. We have fees from registration of marriages. So if in the future you want to marry, and you want to marry through the court, you have to go to the court and register your marriage. The money you pay does not go into the pocket of the registrar of marriages, but it's a source of revenue to the local assembly. We have statutory allocation from the government. Government also made some allocations to every local authority that they use to also see to the development of the assemblies. This also serves as a source of revenue. We have fines from local courts. We have basic rates such as taxes on income of tailors, hairdressers, barbers, musical spinners, livestock breeders, professional photographers, garage owners, video operators, chop bars, slaughterhouses, bread bakers, and others. All these rates that they pay also serve as a source of revenue to the government. Then we have income and other investment that may be made by the local authority. The revenue generated from there also serve as a source of income to the local authority. I will once more, we want to pause here from the beginning of the presentation till now. I have not received any question. If you have any question, I will pause once more and allow for questions before we continue. All you have to do is to show by hand, and then I will allow you to ask your question. Okay, William. Hello. William, just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah.
Just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. Sir,
Yeah.
please can we say income from permits, is it also part of the sources of revenue to a local district?
Income from where?
Permits.
Yes, I have said it. So if you
Okay.
put up a building, you have to go to the local assembly and office and take a permit. This permit that is paid is a source of revenue to the local authority. You cannot, so if you secretly are putting up a building and they don't know, in the future, certainly they will get hold of you. So you will see there are some structures you see along the roadside. Then people are working on it with rent paint, produce permits. Have you ever seen that?
So,
Have you ever seen that?
yes, sir.
So that is paid and is served as a source of revenue to the local assembly. Any other?
Okay. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So thank you.
All right. Any other person ready for with questions? You raise the hand and we'll allow. Otherwise, we'll have to continue. Okay. So if no question, then we'll continue to look at government expenditure. Government expenditure. So if we say expenditure, what does it mean? Expenditure basically is just an amount of money that is spent in acquiring items in the day-to-day operation of an organization. Amount of money that you spend. So an individual, even if you don't owe a business, money that you spend every day to see to your day-to-day activities, that is an expenditure. So when it comes to organizations, they also incur some costs will allow the business running. And for public sector organizations, expenditure that they also incur to ensure that the public organizations run smoothly without lacking anything is what we are referring to as what? Expenditure. And government expenditures are grouped into two types. We have capital expenditure, which we also call development expenditure. Then we also have another called revenue expenditure or recurrent expenditure. So say government expenditures are grouped into two. One is capital expenditure. So the capital expenditure, we also call it development expenditure. Then the second group is revenue expenditure, which is also called recurrent expenditure. So we'll take them one by one and look at the difference between capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. In an examination, you may be asked, just explain government expenditure. They just give it to you like that without specifying whether to explain capital expenditure or to go ahead and explain recurrent or revenue expenditure. So when the situation comes like that, you are obliged to explain both the true groups of the expenditure. That is both the capital expenditure and then the revenue expenditure. So let's look at capital expenditure. Capital expenditure is an expenditure whose benefit of which is not fully consumed in one financial year, but spread over several years. Capital expenditure, we are saying that it is an expenditure that is incurred that the benefit is not enjoyed only within one financial year, but the benefit is enjoyed over several years. You enjoy it this year, another year will come, you may enjoy it. So basically, the benefit lasts more than 1 year. That type of expenditure we are calling a capital expenditure. For instance, your parents also undertake expenditure that they call capital expenditure. The room that you are in now, the room that your parent, houses that your parent build that you live in, it is actually expenditure that they have incurred. But you realize that you are benefiting from using this building not today. You have been using this building. If they have not built it before they give birth to you, Then probably along the way, or even if it is not your parent building, you are living in a rented apartment, you have been in this apartment for some years now. So it is an expenditure that the owner who built the house had incurred, but actually you are benefiting from it for more than one financial year. So this type of expenditure is what we are referring to as well. Capital expenditure. It consists of cost of the purchase of the fixed asset, transportation cost, installation cost, and other costs needed to get the fixed asset ready for use.
Class.
This is very,
I'll
very
call you later.
important. This is very, very important when you are explaining capital expenditure. Capital expenditure does not involve only the purchase price. For instance, if you have money and you have gone to buy vehicle for yourself at an amount of 50,000 Ghana cedis, this expenditure that you have incurred is a capital expenditure. Why? Because you are going to enjoy the benefit for more than one financial year. It is an asset. Are we all right? So when you want to determine the capital, the expenditure for this vehicle which you have acquired, it does not involve only the 50,000 that you have paid. When you acquire the vehicle, you will have to, after paying for the vehicle, there is expenditure you might incur in the transfer of ownership into your name. You have to take the vehicle to the DVLA and go and transfer the vehicle from the original owner's name into your personal name. It doesn't go free of charge. You will pay for some money. You will have to incur some costs in registering the vehicle. It does not go free of charge. All these monies that you will incur to make the vehicle now finally yours that you can use are inclusive in determining the cost of the vehicle. And all this make up what we are calling capital expenditure. Let me take it from another angle. If you have an organization which you needed air conditioner or some installation to be done, or let me just take the Sonrise plant, the plant that we have that when light goes out, it powers the campus, for instance. When we want to determine the expenditure incurred on this plant, it is not only the amount that is incurred in purchasing it. For instance, if the amount incurred in buying this plant, say is 100,000 Ghana cedis, they are not selling it in whole here. They are selling it in Accra. The administrator had to find a means in conveying the plant from Accra to the Sonrise campus. Having brought it here, that is not all. It has to call experts to install the plant, experiment it to see if it works. All this comes with cost. So at the end of the day, if we want to determine the cost of the plant, it includes the amount that is incurred in buying it, the amount that is incurred in transporting it from the seller's premise to the premise of the business, the cost that is incurred in installing it, and maybe transfer of title. All this one we want to determine form the cost of the expenditure incurred in acquiring the plan. So when you want to explain or define capital expenditure, you have to explain or define including all these factors. So we are saying that capital expenditure is an expenditure whose benefit lasts more than one financial year, which consists of the purchase price, the transportation cost, the installation cost, and other costs that are needed in making the asset ready for use. Examples of expenditure incurred by government that we can classify as capital expenditure is the construction of roads, building of hospitals and schools, manufacture of aeroplanes, buying of vehicles for government agencies and departments. All these construction of boreholes for communities, extension of electricity for communities. All these are expenditures which their benefit lasts for more than one accounting period. The next category is revenue expenditure, which is also called current expenditure or recurrent expenditure. Don't forget, capital expenditure, we also call it developmental expenditure. So when I say revenue expenditure, it is that expenditure that the benefit is enjoyed only within one financial year. Examples include wages and salaries, rent and rates, discount allowed, carriage outwards, electricity bill, bad debt. Basically, the expenditure that you know that we use to prepare trading profit and loss account. All those expenditures are expenditures we call revenue expenditure or recurrent expenditure or current expenditure. So when we say current, it means that the benefit is enjoyed only within one financial year. The final thing we'll be looking at is the reasons why we will have to distinguish between capital expenditure and then revenue expenditure. Why do we have to differentiate capital expenditure from revenue expenditure? One of the reasons is to comply with general accepted accounting principle, GAAP. General accepted accounting principle require that expenditures be classified, government expenditures be classified, distinguishing those ones that the benefits are enjoyed within one financial year from those that the benefits goes beyond one financial year. Without doing so, then it means that you are not complying with GAAP. The next is that to prevent the profit or loss from being overstated or understated. So profit and loss account takes record of recurrent expenditure or revenue expenditure. So if you have not separated them, then what is going to happen is that you are going to input, maybe you have a expenditure in buying motor vehicle. Then you will include it amount expenditures in the profit and loss account. Meanwhile, you are not enjoying the benefit for only that year. The benefits go beyond. When you charge the full cost on that, then you will be tempted to be overstating the expenditure for that year. So one of the benefits is to reduce, to be sure that the profit that is reported on, it is not overstated or understated. The next is to avoid overstating or understating cost of assets. Then to show the true and fair profit or loss of the business in a particular financial year. Basically, so for today, this is what we have to look at. And I believe we are all fine with the presentation. And if you have any question at this point, will you ask all the questions that you have jotted down, and then we'll see how best we can help ourselves in understanding them. Otherwise, then today we'll have to bring our class to a close. So ready for questions? So if you have any question now, the presentation has ended. When we meet again, we'll continue from when we have left off. If you have any question, just show by hand, unmute yourself, and then ask your question. Hello. Are we all okay? If you have any question, just show by hand and ask your question now. Otherwise, we'll have to bring the class to a close. By the way, have you all enjoyed the class anyways? Have you made any meaning from the class?
Yes, sir.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, ask.
Sir, do we also account for the sources of revenue for local authority?
I didn't get you.
Sir, do we also account for the sources of revenue from local authorities?
Yes. The district assembly will have to account for funds that they receive and how they spend them. Local authorities, they are the district assemblies, the municipal assemblies, the metropolitan assemblies. Every revenue that is generated has to be accounted for. So when I go back, you can see that I have separated generally the revenue that government, the central government sources from which it generates revenue from. Then I come to local government, where sources from which they also generate their revenue from, which is some are in the sources that the central government generate revenue from, but some are not in there, which is very important. So if I put you in charge of the market to collect market tolls, the money you receive, won't you come and account? You have to.
Yes.
And you have to account for the money revenue that you have received and how the money is spent by the central government and the local assembly. It has to be accounted for to the national government. So yes, it is necessary for local government to account for their revenue received and expenditure they incur. Any other question? Any other question? Well, if there is no other question, then thank you for your time. We'll have to bring our discussion to a close here today. Lord willing, next week, by this time from 2:30 to 4 o'clock, we will be meeting again to continue from where we have left off. However, I will be putting some assignments on the general page, and you are expected to do those assignments and submit them for my considerations before our next meeting. I encourage you to read ahead. You have the notes. You read ahead from where we have left off, and so that when we meet again, I will allow for those questions and any other question that you have had, you come across whilst you were doing your personal reading before we will continue the activity for that particular day. If there is nothing else, nobody has question again, then do take care of yourself. Be sure that you don't move, because if you move, the corona also move. We will need you back to school safely when government leaves the embargo on the restriction, and respect your parents, do what is expected. You see, they have just paid for you to attend classes whilst you are at home. So make sure you do nothing against them. When they send you, go. When you have to cook. Boys also cook. Caleb, you can also cook. Shepherd, if you don't know how to cook, learn to cook. For your father and mother, let them eat and enjoy. And let them be happy for sponsoring you and then ensuring that your future comes great. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself.
You're welcome.
We'll meet again.
You're
Have a
welcome.
nice day. Bye
We'll
bye.
meet again. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, 5. Yeah.
Shepherd, go and play out.
I hear. Jessica, this is your headset, dear.
So, and if you
Yeah,
You know,
live there.
Hey, Shepherd.
Why?
Hello, Shepherd.
Why?
Shepherd.
Shepherd.
yo,
Shepherd. Why are you doing all this? Live there.